Hello, and welcome to this session in the CEDAW Convention Speaker Series. It's being hosted by Equality Bahamas. Over the past more than a year now, we've been going through the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, also known as the Bill of Women's Rights, article by article, bringing experts largely from the CEDAW committee itself to walk us through to get a better understanding of what each article is about, the way that the articles are interpreted by the committee, and the way that each article applies to the Bahamian context and any other context based on those who are joining us live in the Zoom session. We are very excited to be on our last article of the convention now. We ended up going a little bit out of order toward the end. So there are 16 articles, but today we are wrapping up with Article 12, which focuses on health. And we are really excited to welcome an expert from the committee to join us for this conversation today. So those of you who have been tuning into the sessions before, this isn't the first one, you know that we have worked very closely with our very own Marian Bethel, who is an attorney at law in the Bahamas, and also a member of the United Nations CEDAW committee. And she usually brings the introduction to her fellow committee members. Today, unfortunately, Marian isn't able to be here with us. So Genoveva, I want to share with you that Marian did say that you work very closely together on the committee as vice chairs of the CEDAW Bureau, but also in the working group on gender-based violence against women, which you chair. And she emphasized, of course, her great respect for you and your leadership on the committee, and very much wishes that she could be here to warmly introduce you, but she will definitely watch the recording, and I'm sure she'll be in touch with you soon. So Genoveva Tisheva is a member from Bulgaria of the UN CEDAW Committee for the period 2019 to 2022 and 2023 to 2026. She is a vice chair of the committee and co-chair of the working group on gender-based violence against women. And she's the managing director of the Bulgarian Gender Research Foundation and chair of the Alliance for Protection from Gender-Based Violence. Genoveva is a lawyer, researcher, and advocate, expert in the field of gender equality and women's rights, and has extensive experience in legal reform, participation in drafting of the Bulgarian law for protection against domestic violence, of legalization on gender equality and anti-discrimination, and she's experienced in representing women victims of violence in international litigation. Genoveva is director and lecturer in the Women's Human Rights Training Institute, an international educational program established since 2004 in Bulgaria. Over 140 lawyers from Europe and also several lawyers from Africa and Asia were trained in English in the Institute and were taught on all the international mechanisms for protection of women's rights against violence, discrimination in employment, and in their reproductive and health rights. The relevant UN standards like CEDAW Convention and CEDAW OP, or the optional protocol, and European standards and mechanisms, including EU standards, are part of the program. Genoveva Tisheva is member of the European Network of Legal Experts in Gender Equality, and Non-Discrimination until 2019, vice chair of the European Women's Lawyers Association, EWLA, and she holds the 2017 Special Human Rights Defenders Award of the Advocates for Human Rights from Minnesota. It is my pleasure to welcome you today, Genoveva, to present on Article 12 of the convention, which focuses on health. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I commend you for your initiative. Thank you for the presentation, and also I would like to congratulate your country for the Bahamas for the developments in the field of gender equality. Of course, we will speak about what there is still to be done, and I am very pleased that I'm invited also because I'm on the committee with such an extremely experienced expert like Marian Bethel. And of course, we are together. She's my senior in the committee in a way, but also we are now continuing together in as vice chairs of the committee. So we are both interested in these issues of Article 12 on all the substantive articles of the Convention. So I will further develop some highlights about the practice of the committee, so the theory of the Convention and the practice of the committee on Article 12. For the reasons of the connection, as I explained, I will turn off my video when needed, when to speak with people, I will do it again. So Just to start with that the CEDAW convention is the most actually the most comprehensive international standard comprising women's rights in all fields, in all related social, economic, social, cultural, economic rights, civil political rights, and also very importantly, it ensures, and this is one of our work also in the committee that we enhance with Marion Bettel, it ensures protection at universal level from gender-based violence against women and girls. And in the same time, with the more general provisions, the core provisions, it ensures also that the states have the obligation to implement temporary special measures in order to ensure real equality. So it wants to ensure real equality and oblige the states to work by all appropriate measures and without delay for real equality. And also it obliges the states under Article 5 to combat gender stereotyping, which make obstacle to the rights of women, to their empowerment, and at whatever level they are, from whatever source the stereotypes actually are issued or are coming. So they have to actively combat this. So these are all obligations of the state, I can say, that we are monitoring. As one of the most important, we can understand right to health, it actually um, relates to all of us during our life cycle, but also as a right of women is that we monitor the equality and the rights of women in the field of health. This is one of the most important substantive rights guaranteed for women in the CEDAW Convention. It's very important because universally this is actually the specialized universal protection of the rights of women in this field. This is related to all the other substantive rights in the convention, as you already are studying them through your initiative, and including the also the protection from gender-based violence against women, I say, because they're very much related, and I will mention that. And I think this is important when we see the elements of the obligations of the state. It is closely connected to the whole life course of women and girls through their life cycle, as I said, and it's connected to their development, economic activity, identity, autonomy, as we will see also in the practice of the committee. I will say very important element where the committee actually focuses on in this field. And also independence and equality in the family, closely related, and with respect to their decisions related to their body and bodily integrity and about their children. I will just mention one article, one paragraph of Article 16, uh, regulating the right to equality in marriage, is paragraph 1E, which requires that state parties ensure that women have same rights as men to decide freely and responsibly on the number and spacing of their children, and to have access to the information, education, and means to enable them to exercise those rights. We will link it in the with the elements, specific elements of Article 12, and we will see how connected is this right of autonomy of women and independence also with respect to her family and community. Very important. She can claim her rights of independence and autonomy concerning that. So these the obligations of the state, uh, um, as enshrined in Article 12 of the right to health, they include both state obligations, so directly the state responsible with its institutions, and the due diligence obligations in the case of responsibility to protect women and their right to health and their reproductive rights, notwithstanding who is providing the services. I think it's very important, and we will see it in the practice. So what I will highlight is first the main elements of Article 12, as they are enshrined, as I said, in the Convention, what they contain, and immediately linking them to, as I said, the other substantive provisions they are related to in order to see what elements it contains. We will see that it contains some of the most important rights of women also under other articles. It's not unexpected. They are all interconnected as all human rights. And then I will connect it with the latest COPs for the Bahamas from 2018 to see also, you will see these elements, and also we will reason a little bit, and hopefully I can hear and I can hear further that the country made progress around these recommendations that we made at that time. And of course, I will highlight, as I said, some of the latest practice and developments of the committee, and also showing the most important elements of monitoring by the committee of the state obligations in the field of the protection of women's health. And they will touch upon the application of the optional protocol. I know that still, I think the Bahamas, you have not ratified, the Bahamas have not ratified the optional protocol to CEDAW, but I think it's important and relevant, and I will say it again. I will illustrate through one example of the uh, inquiry, inquiries, inquiries report of CEDAW related exactly to reproductive rights of women, health and reproductive rights of women. And then example from the communication procedure during the period actually we worked together also with Marion Bettel on the working group on communications, and they illustrate some of these issues that we will mention, but also other issues you will see the committee will follow also during the dialogues. This is I want to say that the first, I will explain them the main elements, but then I will say that the different way for the different methods of work in the committee actually cover all of them, also monitoring and recommending to the states more effective measures for protection of women's health, be it the dialogue during the states and the concluding observations and recommendations, be it through the optional protocol. Then through the optional protocol, the recommendations are also valid for developing the other methods of work of the committee. So the committee would apply also the recommendations developed as concrete obligation under the general obligation under Article 12. Also, when it will consider country reports, even of countries which are not part of the optional protocol yet, we are sure that most of them will become. But also it means that it develops its practice and concrete recommendations also based on this practice, the optional protocol. What is monitored by the committee to Article 12? First of all, there are two main elements. It's a very broad, actually, coverage of the obligations of the state in the field of health and equality in health access for women. First, to take all appropriate measures to eliminate discrimination against women in the field of healthcare in order to ensure, first, on the basis of equality of men and women, access to healthcare services, including those related to family planning. Immediately, it makes the connection with the reproductive rights also of women. And the second point, second paragraph is very important, that notwithstanding the provisions of this more general paragraph, state parties shall ensure to women appropriate services in connection with pregnancy, confinement, and the postnatal period, granting free services where necessary, as well as adequate nutrition during pregnancy and lactation. So through this, we can see the very broad range of social, economic, civil, political rights actually there at stake. Because here we will see in the concrete recommendations, and also concerning Bahamas, but also in the cases that were mentioned. It also requires education, including introduction of health and sexual and reproductive rights education in schools. It actually includes the status of adolescent girls' rights and their protection, concerning also reproductive rights. It also includes the obligations, general obligations for coverage by health insurance, equally of women, of different groups of women. And here I would like to say that the committee works with from the very beginning, and especially in the last year, with the concept of intersectionality, and also actually touching upon multiple discrimination. So it means that women and girls in different situations are under the attention of the monitoring work of the committee. And here I would like to say that specifically, for example, women with disabilities, women in conflict, post-conflict situation, migrant women, as we will see, older women, rural women, LGBTIQ women, they are specifically addressed, or women in specific situations. You will see also in the practice of the committee, like women drug users, women in prostitution, women also um, with HIV/AIDS. So it means that it's so broad, Article 12, that it actually contains many elements and interconnected of the different rights. So I will illustrate further and will mention further these rights in order not to mention just that. First, in connection with the obligation to protect women, as I said, from gender-based violence, I would like to mention here more specific elements which connect with the obligations of the state under Article 12. Uh, we know that there is, and I think it was presented in your series, that there is general recommendation, first general recommendation 19 from 92, actually on gender-based violence against women, on violence against women, and then the GR 35 from 2017, updating this general recommendation 19. They both contain very important, actually, obligations and developed to interpretation, authoritative interpretation of the committee. They actually acknowledge specifically General Recommendation 19 first, a non-exhaustive list of situations where violations of sexual reproductive rights represent forms of violence against women. So this was stated under various articles of the convention, not only Article 12 in right to health and the related General Recommendation 24 on women and health. The committee issued such a general recommendation, which maybe will be renewed in the future, but this is the basic recommendation, authoritative interpretation of the committee of this issue of the women's health. It contains as an element traditional attitudes, so which are prohibited, which perpetuate widespread practices involving violence or coercion, such as forced marriage and female circumcision. We also monitor these obligations of the state under Article 12 very often. Also, exploitation of the prostitution of women, including girls, or the circumstances of wars, armed conflicts, and the occupation of territories that often lead to increased prostitution, trafficking in women, as we know, all the conflict and sexual assaults of women. Also, in other cases of violence against women, like compulsory sterilization or abortion, very much connected, we know, and this is violation of Article 12, but also Article 5 and the other articles, the core articles of the Convention, and sexual violence under the form of sexual harassment, rape, or sexual assault, and all the consequences concerning health and the needed care and healthcare services, a specialization related to these elements of violation of the right to health of women and also the right to protection from gender-based violence. So except but for compulsory sterilization or abortion, the other circumstances that I mentioned above are cases mainly where the acts of violence are inflicted primarily by private actors and entering into scope of the General Recommendation 19, now also 35, that focused on state obligations to protect women against violence inflicted by non-state actors. But as I said from the beginning, the state is obliged, like in the case of the other substantive obligations of the state, other substantive provisions, they are obliged, the state is obliged to protect, has a clear obligation to protect. So in such cases, the CEDAW committee case law developed a set of standards, we will see, in the form of procedural obligation regarding due diligence obligation of the state. This means that the obligation to protect, not directly to bear the responsibility. They bear the responsibility, but not as a state obligation in terms of the state performing it, but as I said, in the terms of due diligence obligation. So beyond that, as I mentioned, this newer, let's say, General Recommendation 35 on gender-based violence against women, actually, which recognizes that gender-based violence is a principle of, is a norm of international customary law, which is very important. So these general recommendations enriches the committee's approach concerning the connection, as I said, between the right to health, protection of reproductive rights of women, and protection from gender-based violence. Because a series of sexual and reproductive rights violations where the perpetrator of violence against women is the state through legislation, policies, and practices are mentioned here in this very important general recommendation. And it mentions forced sterilization explicitly, forced abortion, forced pregnancy, criminalization of abortion very clearly, denial or delay of safe abortion and or post-abortion care, very important also, forced continuation of pregnancy, and abuse and mistreatment of women and girls seeking sexual and reproductive health information, goods, and services. And we will see that it is being enriched already through the practice of the committee and with relation to the practice and soft law standards and soft law also emanating coming from other other actors in the UN, for example, special procedure. I would mention further even there are other new, let's say, concepts related to this more important, most important obligations of the state, not to exercise violence and not to discriminate women in their sexual reproductive rights. So by acknowledging that the perpetrator in such cases are the state agents, very important, the committee can further emphasize in its practice that these are forms of gender-based violence that, depending on the circumstances, may amount to torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. I think it's very important. So now coming to the situation in, let's say, that the committee found in Bahamas during the, let's say, concluding observations, concluding observation recommendation to the Bahamas. At the 71st session in October 2018, so the committee had several concerns, main concerns. And I hope that there is already progress in your country on these issues, but I will mention them that it's very important and in line also with the elements and the tendencies that I mentioned. The lack of age-appropriate and comprehensive education on sexual reproductive health and rights was found. The lack of family planning services. Can you hear me? Yes? Yes. Also, the inconsistency between the age of sexual consent, which is 16 years, and the age at which contraceptive and other health services may be provided without parental consent, which is 18 years. And the tight restrictions on legal abortion, which may lead women to seek unsafe and illegal abortions. I think very important issue that we will reiterate further concerning the practice of the committee. And also the high maternal mortality rates and the factors that exacerbate this maternal mortality and morbidity, including the possible impact that early pregnancy and unsafe abortions, again mentioned, may have on the rate of maternal mortality. And the lack of specialized services, in particular breast cancer screening and treatment and mental health services, and the prevalence of newly diagnosed cases of HIV/AIDS among women. So corresponding to these concerns are also the recommendations that I hope that they are or there will be developments First, integrate into the school curriculum and public awareness raising campaigns, age-appropriate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights, responsible sexual behavior, and the prevention of early pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. So to ensure that the girls from 16 years have free and adequate access to contraceptive and sexual reproductive health services. And very important, mentioned already that it's something like it's provided in the General Recommendation 35, decriminalize abortion in all cases and legalize abortion in cases, at least in cases of rape, incest, and severe fetal impairment, and provide women with access to high quality post abortion care, in particular in cases of complications resulting from unsafe abortions. So here I would like to mention that there are also, in addition to the recommendations as guidance for further action from your country, until the next period when you will be reporting. There are also WHO guidelines on safe abortion, which is important. The from last year, and it's a complete set of recommendations and best practice statement relating to abortion. It's both on the side of the rights of women, the human rights and the rights of women. It also concerns adolescents' rights. It also concerns the practitioners' guidance needed, and also all the guidance is around safe abortion and avoiding the, as we were speaking also in the recommendations of the Bahamas, avoiding the complications of unsafe abortion. And actually it comes with one of the most contemporary, let's say, current trends um, in also not only decriminalization, so decriminalizing the abortion, I will speak further about that, but also the new tendencies of more liberalization. This is a prevailing tendency, more liberalization in the world as a whole of abortions around the world, abortion laws. So I think it's very important. There is the map of the prevailing trends for liberalization, the map of the laws, abortion law around the world shows this trend. So also other recommendations of the committee strengthen efforts to reduce the high maternal mortality rate, address factors that exacerbate maternal mortality, which, as I said, early pregnancy, unsafe abortion, and implement strategies to combat HIV, in particular preventive policies, and the baseline to determine the prevalence of HIV, especially among at-risk groups, and improve access to for women to mental health services and specialized breast cancer services. I think, as I said, the committee pays special attention always about the rights of rural women, minority women, most vulnerable women. Here, the committee speaks also about focusing also on the situation of women in the family islands, also concerning their access to high quality care, but also asylum seeking women in the Bahamas, also to ensure to them also appropriate care. So it has to be read all in conjunction with the other recommendations of the committee, and also with the main, because you have as priority issues, among the priority issues that of the Bahamas are the state legislation and policy on gender-based violence and on trafficking. And as I said already, and we are discussing it, obvious the link with the health issues of women in these cases, and the need to improve and to have more effective protection of health. So the main developments through the other methods of work in the committee, I said, are very important. So I think that the outcomes from the procedures, the communication procedure under the optional protocols and the cases under the inquiry procedure of the optional protocol shape really and influence the practice of the committee, which is very important. And it's good that they are known. And I will just mention some of the cases that can be checked and discussed further, but that show now during the years clear development in the direction of independence and autonomy of women and decriminalization of women and decriminalization of abortion. All this is in this direction. Um, so the concerning the, I will start with the briefly with the inquiry, one of the 7 inquiries when we have inquiry reports under Article 8 of the optional protocol. The inquiry concerning Great Britain and Northern Ireland on the issue of the right to abortion and access to safe abortion. Just to say that this procedure under Article 8, the inquiry procedure, is triggered when the committee receives reliable information indicating grave or systematic violation of women's rights by a state party to the convention, but also to the optional protocol. It's required both that they are state parties to these 2 conventions, because it's also the optional protocol. It's not optional, it's a convention for the countries which ratified. So what is, what was the issue? This grave and systematic violation in the case of Northern Ireland is that the states actually failed to establish comprehensive legal framework to protect, guarantee women in Northern Ireland the right to abortion. And then it did not ensure that women in Northern Ireland are not exposed to the health risk of unsafe abortion. As I said, very important issue for the committee, and also that there were indications, reliable information that the state failed to address social, practical, and financial obstacles to access to abortion, obstacles that disproportionately affect rural women. This is also an important element. Actually, what the committee recommended in this case, I will immediately say the main recommendation and now see how it was followed up by the country, which is very important that the state party then followed up. So this, when the report of the committee on the inquiry, on this inquiry, was issued in 2018, and actually it required from the country to repeal sections of the Offense Against the Person Act, so that no criminal charges can be brought against women and girls who undergo abortion or against qualified healthcare professionals and all others who provide and assist in the abortion. Very important. Also, it also recommended the state to adopt legislation to provide for expanded grounds to legalize abortion, at least in the cases threat to the pregnant women's physical or mental health without conditionality of long-term or permanent effects, and rape and incest, and severe fetal impairment, including fatal fetal abnormality, without perpetuating stereotypes towards persons with disabilities, and also ensuring appropriate ongoing support, social and financial, for women who decide to carry such pregnancies. I think all very important elements. You can see how the right to health is developed, expanded, even if it is within, as I said, the very broad mandate, let's say, of the Article 12 itself. So to adopt also evidence-based protocol for healthcare professionals, providing legal abortions, particularly on the grounds of physical and mental health, and ensure continuous training of the protocols. I would like to say that when the committee says here it's the developed practice in this inquiry concerning Northern Ireland, that at least in this case is to legalize abortion. As I said, it said clearly that at least it means that as I said, the provisions of the convention and the general trend actually at the moment show that even it's the best thing to apply the convention would be not to have any requirement for legal requirement for ground for abortion. But here it's just set at that time, and concerning this case at least, very important. And other recommendation provide non-biased, scientifically sound and right-based counseling and information for women. and ensure the accessibility and affordability of sexual and reproductive health services. Very interesting what actually the committee, what actually is the latest follow-up report. There is a follow-up report, like in the procedure when we have inquiry reports, according to the inquiry procedure under the optional protocol, where the state responded in the beginning of the year 2023 that about the measures taken. First, the first measures against criminalization is very important by Northern Ireland, by UK concerning Northern Ireland, that there were legislative changes in the immediate decriminalization of abortion through the repeal of the sections mentioned in the recommendations of the committee, and which came into effect even still in October 2019, which is very important. And also a moratorium at this time on abortion-related criminal proceedings was also into effect, meaning that no police investigation, no prosecution could be actually implemented continue. Also, new regulation, of course, a little bit later, they started working on it. Started working with the regulations on abortion, with the, as I said, how is abortion regulated and what are the legal grounds, but it is also in course. And it is said that this is the first time that abortion services have been formally commissioned and funded in Northern Ireland, bringing necessary investment into the development of sustainable services. And also, it's very important concerning education, um, sexual and reproductive rights education, that the UK government is currently considering, it says, options to ensure CEDAW compliant relationship and sexuality education that they have introduced, that is made compulsory component of the curriculum of Northern Ireland. You see here how important was this inquiry and this practice at the committee and its recommendation. Just to mention some outcome of some individual communications. There is still time already during the discussion, because I want to make some points of this other practice under the individual communications, when their communications are brought by or on behalf of individuals or groups of individuals of state parties, also to the optional protocol, as I said, claiming to be victims of a violation of any of the rights mentioned. Among other rights, violations of Article 12, the right to health, were found in I would like to mention just the outcome from 3 cases in these last years, as I said, 2 against Spain and 1 against the Russian Federation. Against Spain, the first one is from 2018, SFM versus Spain. And it relates to the issue, as it's a relatively new issue from 2018, 2019, on a concept that is developed in your region, and it also developed in Spain and also in your region. Now it's not only popular, but we will see it's also in the soft law of the special procedures, the special rapporteur of violence against women, but also in the WHO guidelines. This the, uh, the ban on the violence against women at childbirth, during giving birth, or the so-called obstetric violence. So out of these 2 cases against Spain, I about that. There are actually 3 cases against Spain. I will mention just the first one and the last one that we had. I think this year in the beginning was decided in our committee, and that illustrates the development of the thinking of the committee, and let's say further in the making more concrete obligations, as I said, in the framework of the obligations as enshrined in the provisions of Article 12. The first case is the case communication number 138/2018. You can see it. SFM versus Spain. So it's the first case about obstetric violence, or violence against women at childbirth. Um, so the committee found that there was an alternative to the situation experienced by the author, given that her pregnancy had progressed normally and without complications, and that there was no emergency when she arrived at the hospital. But that nevertheless, from the moment she was admitted, She was subjected to numerous interventions about which she received no explanation and was allowed to express no opinion. I just described the situation to see how what amounts to one of the cases which amounts to the so-called obstetric violence. So the committee based its assessment on the report also of the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, not only on the convention provisions, of course, its causes and consequences, submitted to the General Assembly on a human rights-based approach to mistreatment and violence against women in reproductive health services with a focus on childbirth and obstetric violence. So according to the committee, a particular relevance for this communication, SFM versus Spain, is the special rapporteur's assertion that an episiotomy, which was performed on her, may have adverse physical and psychological effects on the mother, can lead to death, and may amount to gender-based violence and torture and inhuman and degrading treatment. Um, so the violation which was found was a violation of the procedural obligation of the state to investigate gender-based violence and to protect women in such cases. Um, so just to say, you have discussed also in other cases, maybe under other issues, that when the committee issues its recommendations in a specific case, in specific communication, first it says that this is unique for the committee, that concerning the author, it recommends to the state to provide appropriate reparation, including adequate financial compensation for the damage suffered. I mean, it's something that the state has to see. I mean, to see how the what is proportionate according to the state and the negotiations between the state and the victim. The victim in such a case, what would be appropriate for compensation. But usually, I mean, states started paying compensation. So in general, and in terms of more general recommendation, as I said, they oblige, I mean, the committee recommended, not obliged, but to provide women with adequate information on each stage of childbirth and establish a requirement for the free, prior, and informed consent. Very important, free, prior, and informed consent of women to be obtained for any invasive treatment. So and conduct research on obstetric violence. As I said, this was the first case. It was a breakthrough, but I mean the next case is from the beginning of this year, expands actually on this and also ensure effective remedies for women who suffer from obstetric violence. This was even in the first case, but in the communication 154/2020, it is. The let me see the specific, yes. Uh, it is again a case against Spain. Women is the woman is with initials also. Do you want me to mention the specific case, and then I can write it? No, I can write it separately to you if you want this 154. Yes. So it's continuing on affirming that there should be protection from obstetric violence. I mean, that the state should ensure protection from obstetric violence. The committee actually notes in this specific case that there is still no official definition of obstetric violence, but the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, its causes and consequences, uses this term to refer to violence against women experienced during facility-based childbirth. Particularly relevant for this case, the last case, the third case the committee issued on this issue, are the assertions that a cesarean section performed without the women's consent and the use of inexperienced medical staff to carry out gynecological examinations are acts that may amount to obstetric violence. This is important for this specific case. Also, particular relevance in her assertion that informed consent for medical treatment related to reproductive health services and childbirth is a fundamental human right. So additionally, as a recommendation in this case, I think it's important that, as we say, we expand it after the first case, SMF versus Spain, and in to ensure that women have access to, this is according to Article 12, as I said, to the enunciation of Article 12, that women have access to adequate healthcare services during pregnancy, childbirth, and the postpartum period, and that they are protected from mistreatment, disrespect, and abuse during childbirth in healthcare institutions. And this is something I think like an obligation developed and more concretely that we can now see, as I said, in the dialogues with all the countries when they come in front of the committee and report on the implementation of the convention. And also, again, provide women with adequate information and to this obligation for the free, prior, and informed consent. Also ensure that the staff working in public and private healthcare institutions, very important, comply with these obligations. I think very important expansion of obligations of the state and also due diligence obligation. And also to review the existing legislation on gender-based violence against women, also very important, now new recommendation, with a view to including other forms of gender-based violence, such as obstetric violence. And now we are seeing, even at the last session, we have recommendations to some countries directly, if they have not included, to consider including obstetric violence among when they are actually adopting their laws or amending their laws. And I will mention a last case in order to mention, as I said, intersectionality and women in specific situations, for example, women drug users. And this is the case of Shpagina versus the Russian Federation. I think some very important case. I was rapporteur on this case, just briefly to say, and it is an important case because we also had discussion around that about vulnerabilities and if they have really justified a specific treatment and even temporary special measures, and we were actually reasoning around that, and I think there will be developments even in this field. So our committee has found various violations of women's rights, of the rights of this woman, Shpagina specifically. She was drug user, she was deceased already at the time when we decided that the communication, when we adopted the views and the recommendation. As she had no access to affordable, medically appropriate, gender-sensitive drug dependence treatment and rehabilitation services during pregnancy. You see, it's another field where we actually are entering with recommendations. Um, Oksana claimed her rights to non-discriminatory healthcare services, including these very appropriate medical services for herself because she was heavily dependent but pregnant. Um, and she thinks that her rights, the absence of the discrimination during this period and the absence of specific, as I said, sensitive measures was a violation of by the state. So what I said actually, and I will reiterate here because it's now at the end, I would like to say that the claims of such women, their communications, because she was alive when she brought the communication. Uh, there's, uh, uh, there's women like Oksana Shpagina who unfortunately did not survive. Uh, they they recall that special attention should be given to the health needs and rights of women belonging to vulnerable, disadvantaged groups. And Shpagina was an orphan, already widowed at some point before the committee interview. Single mother suffered from chronic drug dependence. When she became pregnant in 2011, her gynecologist advised her to undergo induced labor to terminate her pregnancy because of the risk and the medical condition and the risk that would prevent her from giving birth to a healthy baby. So she was immediately confined to this, not given the possibility to continue her pregnancy as observed and with special treatment. This caused her so much distress that she attempted suicide and resumed her drug use. And when she decided to continue her pregnancy, she was admitted to a drug rehabilitation clinic where doctors refused to treat her. Um, to treat her because she was pregnant. She was pregnant, but also with addiction. When she was finally admitted to a hospital, she was merely given sedatives and discharged after only 9 days of treatment without any outpatient follow up. So she eventually gave birth to a healthy baby girl who is now alive and one of her close relatives actually takes care of her. And however, she developed fear of doctors, medical procedures, and also she was humiliated, treated in inferiority, and stigmatized. Um, so it also caused that she claims in her communication frequent health problems after that in the following years, and including several relapses in illicit drug use. And Also before, as I said, before the communication issue, she was she receded. But I think it's important that from the very beginning she claimed that the government had not provided her with evidence-based, gender-sensitive drug dependence treatment, such as opioid substitution therapy, for example, in her case, and that there was a lack of rehabilitation facilities for women, also with children. Um, Also the social stigmatization of women drug users, specifically when they are pregnant, also was addressed by the committee, um, um, in line also with uh, the policy principles and concept of intersectionality and treating vulnerabilities with special attention. Uh, but I said this perseverance of Mrs. Spagina, despite her situation, I was really uh, shocked, impressed, as I say. This case demonstrates that women have the right to require this treatment as drug dependent, and also they can stand for the rights for typically for herself, for the other for the others. Because now the committee requested in its views and recommendation that the Russian Federation provide full reparation, including adequate financial compensation to the victim's daughter, and also ask the state party to modify its legislation to prevent and address discrimination against women in the healthcare sector, and to ensure the availability of drug dependence treatment and rehabilitation tools to to women, including pregnant women. You see, these are developments we still have to see, and after our discussion and these views that we have to discuss, and I think that are very important. And I can say that in the not only have we decided very recently these cases, as we see, especially these three of them, but also it's all in development. Dependencies in the world are all in development, and I think we have to take all this into account, especially states and civil society in specific countries, and in the Bahamas and in all our countries, when the countries present their reports, the state parties, and also the committee takes, as you see, into consideration all the developments, not only its practice, but also by other bodies, agencies. So especially the right to health, but also rights is the situation is dynamic, and there will be more and more concretization of the rights, more detailed. And I think it's very much justified, especially in the field of health, that we have. I mean, states are very diligent, are very um, also take much care, even much more care, especially as I wanted to say, pandemic after pandemic, we learn. We seem to that we learned, but now we are business is coming to the usual, and I think it's not. We should not lose sight of the importance of this issue.
Thank you so much, Genoveva, for this great presentation, and particularly for the inclusion of the cases, which I think just make it so much more real. You know, we sit with the convention and the articles and all these words, but I think hearing the cases of actual people, of women who have gone through particular circumstances, really helps to make the situation and what the convention is supposed to do for us more concrete. And this is really important for us in the Bahamas, where we're not necessarily taught a whole lot about the government's obligations to ensure that we have access to all of our human rights, particularly in the area of health. So I thank you for bringing this to us today. I have quite a number of questions. I really appreciated that you made the connection between health and gender-based violence. In particular, this is a very big topic in the Bahamas, has been for a couple of decades. And over the last few months, we have been talking about having a gender-based violence bill and the importance of that. And the government recently made a decision to throw the gender-based violence bill away and instead bring a protection against violence bill that's general and doesn't address women at all. So at Equality Bahamas, we've been trying to make the case and help people to understand that gender-based violence is a public health issue. Is there a way that the convention, I guess, validates that position? And how have you seen Articles 5 that look at gender stereotyping, but also gender-based violence, and Article 12 on health kind of working together and being used to bring states to this recognition that this is a public health issue when we're looking at gender-based violence?
I mean, thank you very much for this question. And I think in a more categorical way, it can be said in some cases or to some states for sure, I mean, during dialogues. And but it's already, as we were speaking, it's such a close connection between the core obligations, the Article 5 concerning stereotype and gender-based violence, and Article 12, and more, as you see also in the general recommendations, in the most recent ones, it will be more and more emphasized, as I say, and developed. So I think it's obvious, as you said, since we more and more recognize in the cases of gender-based violence directly, as I said, the substantive obligations of the states, not only procedural to protect them from the others, but this direct obligation as a state. And more it will come, especially in protection of women's health issues and reproductive rights issues. You see the issues now we are discussing so much in discussion and always about safe abortion, access to abortion, access to safe abortion even of adolescent girls, of girls. I think it's very important. Parental consent, these issues of consent. So it is a public health policy. And as you see also, and the last issue, I think this concept of obstetric violence, very important one that it will be developing. It's already recommended by the committee that it enters in the legislation gender-based violence. As I said, we are not only in this case as a recommendation to the country, the specific country against which the communication was brought, but also, as I said, now using it to dialogue. So it's already public health policy. And I will give you the example of the latest case. I found the connection between the dialogues we are having currently and the refinement by the states themselves of their obligations. And that's very interesting when they report. And especially, I mean, from all over the world, we can see such good examples. But for example, when we are working in the session, we are working on this Pagina case, and we are in discussion in the committee about, as I said, how far to go with vulnerabilities, and also in such a case, you can understand there were also issues about the behavior, the attitude of the woman drug addict. I mean, to some extent, you know, herself putting in some situations concerning specifically criminal cases she was subjected to, and then she was actually indicted and prosecuted, and then she went in prison, and where actually she died on one of the occasions. But then we separated, it is connected, as I said, but we separated that it's an issue that the state should take into account. It's not a criminal issue, it's an issue of everyday public policy. Also, this refinement in its obligation of the state everywhere, even in cases of women in vulnerable situations. As I said, vulnerable groups of women, and all women in all situations, in vulnerable situations. And during, as I said, that discussion, there were states reporting. I don't remember, it was yes, because it's public in their report, Slovenia. And yes, I think one of these countries from Europe, and in this occasion, they were exactly speaking under Article 12 about refinement of their policy concerning women drug users, especially pregnant women drug users. You see, it's entering the concepts, the elements which are contained in the right to health, as I said already, because it's very broad as in Article 12, are entering the policies. And this is something, and also concerning gender-based violence, I already mentioned. So this is something like it's an obligation. And now when we say in General Convention 35 that uh, the the state directly violates the rights of women, like this most, let's say, appalling examples shown, including criminalization of abortion. This is something that they should really, and that's why it's recommended that it's something that should be really abolished, because this is uh, this is the state policy. I mean, this should be done. Let's say, as I say, countries are doing it now. Some of them immediately they remove that, but for sure, this is the immediate state obligation. It all depends on the state. It's not about procedural obligation to protect and to ensure. Here is they immediately can introduce, and I think that many states now also having these interpretations, and it's obvious that it's their obligation, because as you said, if it's not done, when there is an unsafe abortion, when we see not only in the Bahamas but for other countries, and there are such risks from unsafe abortions that it is directly can be the most not even repressive, I would say, in some countries, but the most, let's say, restrictive regimes of to access to a safe abortion. Uh, they uh, they actually can bring to torture and human degrading treatment at different levels of these very actually serious violations, and also sometimes to death, as we know. So I think that's why we should work on a more refined policies and make even concepts that now somebody can say that they emerge, but it it refers to health. It has been found concerning health of people, concerning women's health, connected to children, and it should be implemented as soon as possible.
Thank you for that. I've also been thinking a lot about maternity in general, and postnatal care, largely because Equality Bahamas has been doing research recently on leave following childbirth, and how maternity leave and not having family leave or paternal leave turns into reinforcing gender stereotypes and the idea that women are responsible for all of the domestic and care work. And so we've been talking with women who've had children in the last 7 years or so, and most of them have been women who've had children in the last 2 or 3 years. Many people who gave birth during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are so many interesting things that came out of it that really exposed the inadequacies of the healthcare system, and other systems like the employment contract, and only having 3 months of maternity leave, and only being able to access paid leave once every 3 years. So it kind of takes away from the right to, deciding how you want to space your children, and so on and so forth. But one of the things that's unique about the Bahamas is that it's an archipelago. So we're all these islands that are sort of sprinkled in the ocean, and everything is very centralized to New Providence, where the capital is. And most of these islands barely have a clinic, if they do at all, have sort of a health clinic. And it is, I'm not quite sure if it's law, I think it must be law, that if you are pregnant and living on what we call the family islands, so not in New Providence and not in Grand Bahama, you must leave the island and come to New Providence before travel is restricted. So it's something like when you're at 6 or 7 months, you must move to the capital to give birth in a hospital. So even if you wanted to have the baby at home, have a midwife, have your own doctor on island deliver, there is no real choice there. You have to be relocated. And this presents so many issues, right? So if you have to leave, that means that your maternity leave has to start early, so you don't have very much time post-birth. It means that you are likely separated from your partner, who would otherwise be supporting you. If you go into labor early, then your partner is a flight away. Who knows when they'll be able to make it? There are just all of these issues, and this restriction on choice and self-determination and making our own decisions about our health. I know that we will be before the CEDAW committee probably in the next year or two. It's been put off because of, again, the pandemic. I don't know what comes to mind for you when you hear this, because I'm already thinking through how we're going to present this information in a shadow report and what kinds of recommendations we would like to get from the committee on this issue of just neglect, but also what amounts to state violence against women in healthcare, and in particular pregnant women.
I think it's in both. What you're saying is both in the general obligation to ensure access to health, what you were speaking, this problem about that women have to relocate and all these violations actually of their rights. She's not obliged, and she has to find, I mean, the support in the place where she is usually, or be ensured also transportation and all this, because also it's also part of that. If she has to be moved to another infrastructure, it has to be insured and paid and financially insured. So I don't know what is typically the situation, but I think it's definitely something that has to be open for, it's negligence, but also if that has been for a long time, it means that it's also related, I think, to hearing from you and knowing from situations in other countries and how they actually appoint and how there is this division between the different specialists in the country. First facilities, but also doctors, because I think specifically for women it's very important the specialized care. And as I said, training, specialization, infrastructure, coverage by social security, or free, services in most cases, only if there is, as this was said, most of the time free. So all this has to be analyzed and seen. For sure it will be a violation, and I mean it can be, because it will be during a let's say dialogue or during a report. We think that it has to be signaled if it continues, because also in connection, in conjunction, I don't know, with, as I said, the other recommendation of the committee and to what extent they are implemented, because as far as I saw, I don't want to, to to influence in any way, but I think there is still no decision about the criminalization, starting from the abortion. So it means if there is no actually analysis of the attitudes and move, they could be, for example, a move for changing in the positive sense also these realities in relation to which the committee made the recommendations. This is important, and also if there are new issues, and to think about how they work with the training, special training, and where they are especially going in the different islands, and there should be this policy. Otherwise, concentration in just one two places, I mean, there is no logic, is no implementation of the obligation in the state party in no way. And it has to be taken into account the structure, of course, of the state territorially, that you are an island. So it's something that it's up to the state to be taken into account. But also, as I said, recommendations already made, and to link with that and to see where actually lie the obstacles to women's independence, autonomy, and free decision. Of course, as you mentioned in the beginning, it was connected also with your employment legislation and to see developments in that and to have more opportunities that we recommend also, and more often and more. I mean, different schemes for also parental leave, and to have obligatory periods, for example, for parents, not only in the European region, but everywhere, for example, for parental leave, but just for fathers, in order to, as you said, for the partners, for the fathers to be able to participate fully, and then for women to decide. Maybe they can go to work earlier. They can. It can be both parents at some period staying at home, or some of them going. I mean, it's all depending on choices. But women should have choices if she wants to, in whatever country, if she wants to stay and take care of the child, to have opportunities for returning, for starting work, for starting enterprise. This is one thing, and but also it has to be coupled. It has to be also accompanied by measures to ensure that the father, that the partner, and the spouse can also have specific rights and encourage, because we know that in order not to perpetuate the stereotypes, they should be encouraged and there should be promotional measures.
Absolutely. You went through some of the recommendations from the concluding observations from 2018. And as I read through them and listened to you read them, I thought, wow, we really haven't made progress on these 5 years later. The sexual and reproductive health and rights education and school curriculum, that's still not happening. Access for people 16 years and up to sexual and reproductive health services and access to contraceptives still isn't happening. So there's this gap between 16, when you are able to legally consent to sexual activity, and 18, when you're actually able to access healthcare services without an adult, without a parent or a guardian present. We still have not decriminalized abortion in all circumstances. There is a lot of work to be done there, and we kind of already can imagine the debate that will be launched when we make the push for decriminalization of abortion, because there's such a resistance to it. And then mental health services doesn't really, this is something that still doesn't get a whole lot of attention. I think we saw it at its peak following Hurricane Dorian, that significantly and severely affected two of the northern islands of the Bahamas. There was recognition that, oh, there are mental health consequences here and we need to address them. And then the pandemic started shortly after that. So there were some hotlines, some mental health hotlines, but that's already sort of dying down. There isn't as much attention to mental health services in general. And these services are very necessary to be provided, in particular to survivors of gender-based violence of various forms, right? So you talked about forced birth, so people who aren't able to access abortion. There are people who are experiencing intimate partner violence and domestic violence, people who are survivors of rape and other forms of sexual violence. And mental health services haven't really been built into the system, so that, if you report to the police, you go to a clinic, you have a medical examination, and then you get a referral to a mental health professional. Have you seen other countries that are doing quite well with this, with integrating mental health services into the overall healthcare services, particularly for people who've experienced gender-based violence?
I think this is an issue that we find very very often as an obstacle to women's rights. There are examples not only in Europe but in also in other parts of the world. And as I say, also this is first about in relation to gender-based violence means to all women, all ages, also women and girls victims of violence. Um, I think it's something that it's also we recommend in Article 5 or in connection sometimes with Article 12, because we also discuss when we take decision about the concluding observations and recommendation for the specific country where mostly to place, like for the FGM issues, another one mostly to place it in 12 or in 5, but anyway we find a way that it is a priority, because it's usually these are priority issues that they find their right place depending also on the country. But there is also mental health issues that we started paying attention. We are paying attention actually, and lately paid attention concerning recommendation mental health issues for women, older women. And this is something that it's not so much taken into account, because you have spoken about COVID and all that, but also for some persons at a certain age, in addition to all the other factors also. So I think it's because the committee is also committed to monitoring the performance of the state in relation to protection of also this group. So this is something that I would add. And when considering mental health, it means gender-based violence issues, but also and integrating into the system, but also the specialization also concerning mental health problems of older women, because they have to be taken into account. Also, with in relation to life expectancy, because we know that it's also, we know that related to that, but should not lose sight of the fact that also, as so in Bahamas and in others, when women are surviving, but also surviving how, which is the and more into this, let's say, quality of services, because it's quality of life. Because as I said from the beginning, this right is actually all your life of every person, of your family, and it's not only in quantity and existing infrastructure, which is so important, it's so essential, and full coverage, but also quality and training the personnel more and more. Also, I think in your case, we can see it also relates to counseling about medical counseling about gender-based violence and other, but also concerning the other groups, as I said, drug users, um, women in other specific situations, HIV/AIDS. It requires specialization in order to address that. Women with disabilities, as I mentioned, very important. It requires lots of knowledge and attention. So more and more this, and also the other group of women, not speaking about LGBTIQ women, that actually there is no knowledge and people are left outside of the system. And not only, not in your country, it's everywhere that it has to be recommended, and for all the groups. So it's, but this integration of uh, into the health system, exactly, of this counseling, this is something that is, I think, generally also a weakness in the systems, and not mentioning the health system among the, let's say, interested actors. The other day, because there are here in Bulgaria, for example, there is new legislation, let's say, improving. We will see, we will have more effective protection against domestic violence. Again, the prime minister, this is the inertia. The prime minister invited 4 ministries to present concrete measures for, let's say, in 1 month they have to start working. In September they will check if they will be working more effectively based on this law. Just this amendment entered into force now, but they want to check immediate measures to have for 1 month. And then the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Labor Social Policy, and the Ministry of Education. And we were saying, in the interviews, Michael, so where is the Ministry of Health? Where we were speaking immediately when we speak about health, we spoke about gender-based violence, we spoke about different forms, we spoke about direct responsibility of the state, and also performing, sometimes participating in this violence. So you see, there is still not this consciousness of the integration in the whole system, and the fragmented responses in all cases actually are a risk for the women.
Yeah, thank you for raising this and bringing out the importance of intersectionality, and recognizing Kimberly Crenshaw for her work in coming up with this term for us, to help us to really talk about the need to think about the diversity of people and how our identities determine the ways that we move through the world, and the types of oppression and violence that we face because of these layered identities, and understanding as well that all women are not the same. And we see it a lot in legislation, in policy making, and in discussions about women's rights in particular. There's a discussion about women as though we all have the same experiences. But like you mentioned, there are women who have addictions. There are women who are in the LGBTQ plus community. There are women who are in rural areas, or for us in the Bahamas, living in the Family Islands. And all of these women have very specific needs. And all of those needs should be met through integrated systems, not, health is over here doing something, and, national security is over here doing something else, and education's over there, but it needs to be connected and in a way that we're able to navigate, and that we're able to be referred and move through these channels, and we're not starting over every time we have to deal with a new entity, and in particular, a new government agency, which tends to be the case and is very, very exhausting, especially if you're dealing with something that's very sensitive or related to violence. And I also appreciate that you made a point of saying that, violence isn't always non-state actors. There are many cases where the state is the perpetrator of violence and of gender-based violence, and in particular of gender-based violence against women and girls. This is something that we have to remember, that we have to keep in mind, and something that we center in our work at Equality Bahamas, because we look at gender-based violence as including structural violence, including laws and policies that work against us. So it's really helpful for you to validate that and to bring that to reality with the cases that you mentioned, and bringing your expertise and interpretation of Article 12 in particular, but also integrating some of the other articles of the convention of CEDAW to give us a more solid understanding. So really, really appreciate you being here with us today, Genoveva. Is there anything else that you were really hoping to say today, or anything that you want to add to your presentation?
Just at the end, now also listening to you and how broad is really, let's say, not only the coverage of Article 12, which is more mechanical, let's say, to say that, but to see how broad the issues are of health of women, of health and relation with the health of the child, with the health of the family, of the community. That I would say that let's take better care, for the state of women, for the community to take care of women, and for ourselves, and for women to take care of themselves. Because I think the women's health, they are the pillar. This is the pillar. When she is in good health, and she has to be in good health, because she is the basis, the pillar for the health and the well-being and of the family, of the community. And of her husband, spouse, partner, also we know how much dependent is that. So really, health has to be preserved, maintained, and developed according to, as we know, also the Convention of the Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, and also the principle that in line with the most recent and the developments of scientific developments, and women should benefit of all these developments, also women's health and rights.
Thank you again. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you to Mary and Bethel for helping to coordinate the CEDAW Convention Speaker Series, where we delve into the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, one article at a time. And now that we're at the end of all of the articles, it's really interesting to see, particularly in the last few sessions, how interconnected the articles are. I definitely found it difficult to look at Article 12 without thinking about Article 16 or Article 5. They're all connected. They're all so reliant on each other in Article 11. Thank you to all of the speakers, all of the experts from the committee and others who've joined us for this series. It does not end here. We plan to look at a few of the general recommendations that are particularly important to us in the Bahamas and to the work that we're doing at Equality Bahamas. So look out for a few more of these sessions. Again, this is one in the series that is leading up to the 30th anniversary of the Bahamas ratifying the CEDAW Convention. So we will be at that anniversary in October. So we have a couple months to go, and we'll see how we close out the whole series later this year. Thank you again, Genoveva. Thank you, Mary and Bethel. And thank you to those who joined us on Zoom and on Facebook Live and who will watch the recordings later on. You can check out our YouTube channel to see the recordings of all of the sessions that we've had so far in the CEDAW Convention Speaker Series, as well as some of the other sessions that we've had, Women's Wednesdays, and sessions that were a part of the Global 16 Days campaign, also known as 16 Days of Activism Against Violence Against Women or Against Gender-Based Violence. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.
The recording has stopped.